Welcome to the Wellness Pulse with Monica Stevens. From CPR to self care, staying in rhythm with your well being. Thanks for tuning in. Early resuscitation efforts were creative but chaotic. It wasn't until the mid 20th century that CPR finally combined oxygen delivery and blood circulation based on current science, saving millions of lives ever since. So, bringing us up to speed, just to kind of recap a little bit, we pretty much were doing some eccentric but heartwarming things in the 17 and early 1800s. We did kind of realize, I guess, as a human peoples, that we needed to get oxygen resuscitated, we needed to get circulation, but the way of doing that, I guess, was easily identified, or what I should say is that I guess drowning victims presented the knowledge or the situation where people learned that people weren't actually dead all the time, and that there was like a period where they could be saved if you could get them back breathing. So um so people realized instinctively that breath equaled life. Culture sometimes link breath to the spirit or to the soul. So I guess it was thought that if you could restart breath, maybe you could restart life. I guess also, as previously mentioned, drowning victims sometimes revived if they were helped quickly. And this inspired a lot of rescue breathing efforts and, I think, discoveries. I guess surgical accidents led way to compressions, which was somehow discovered when dogs were accidentally revived during defibrillator tests. Now, I didn't have time to research that, so I know for all my animal lovers out there, that's probably really freaky. So we'll probably have to do like another episode on that. But I don't know why the dogs needed reviving. Um, as we've already kind of gotten or alluded to, I feel like CPR was born out of desperation, someone wanting to save a loved one or someone that they witnessed collapse. Because a lot of humans are actually just compelled to help people in need. I know, surprising, right? It's not really. There are a lot of people like us who are out here who want to help, even though times have changed and, things may seem a little bit more bleak, but the human spirit is still the human spirit, and most of us still want to save others if we needed to be saved and they knew how. So this brings us up to 1891, right? And the first compressions actually, I guess, were inspired or created by this gentleman named Frederick Maas. It's Maass. So I'm going to call him Maas. And if that's not right, I apologize. And I guess he's often overlooked because he's a German physician, and he documented something pretty extraordinary, that he revived a patient using closed chest cardiac massage. No incisions, no high tech tools, even high tech for the time, just pressure applied externally to the chest. He wasn't following a protocol. In fact, he was inventing one. So, at a time when heart surgery meant splitting the chest open, Moss's method was revolutionary. But because his paper was published in German and the medical world most likely wasn't ready for his radical simplicity, his contribution was largely ignored for decades. But make no mistake, Frederick Maas, I guess, was the first. And the spark he struck wouldn't catch fire until like a half a century later. So that takes us up to almost 1950, to Cleveland, Ohio, 216, 216. Yes, the Ohio, the heart of it all. Um, the heart of it all. Even though that's not really why Ohio is called the heart of it all, but it should be. Dr. Claude Beck in 1947 performed the first successful human defibrillation during open heart surgery on a 14-year-old boy at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio. So his work laid the foundation for future defibrillation and CPR techniques. Cleveland hospitals in the 1940s and 1950s helped refine cardiac arrest protocols, proving sudden cardiac arrest was survivable. Um, they demonstrated that if you acted quickly, circulation could be restored and lives could be saved. Beck's success didn't just stay in Ohio. It inspired a wave of innovation, particularly at Johns Hopkins University, where Dr. William, I may butcher this name, Dr. William Cowenhoven, Dr. James Jude, and Dr. Guy Knickerbocker. So they became known as the trio. So without Beck's courage and Ohio's quiet innovation, CPR and AED development might have been delayed by like more decades. But by 1960, CPR became formalized with rescue breathing and chest compressions. Cleveland hospitals had already refined their emergency cardiac protocols. So I guess it led way to Dr. Paul Zoll, who performs the first closed chest external defibrillation, which built on Dr. Beck's foundation. So a little bit more, I guess, about the forgotten father of rescue breathing, and that's Dr. James Elam. So before chest compressions became standard, so all this stuff was kind of happening like around the same time. Like in the 50s and the 60s, you had people who were discovering that you could do external chest defibrillation. You're having people discovering that rescue breaths. Well, I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead, but you have people discovering that external compressions can stimulate the heart, and now we're getting ready to discuss the discovery of rescue breaths and combining it together, making CPR what we know as today. And so this ends up leading way to the ABCs, but taking the long way to get there, we're going to go back to the forgotten father of rescue breathing, which is Dr. James Elam. So again, this is before chest compressions became standard and before AEDs. So someone had to prove that a single breath could save a life, and that was Dr. James Elam. He was born in 1918, and he was an anesthesiologist working at Roswell Park Memorial Institute in Buffalo, New York. So in the early 1950s, he noticed a critical problem that rescue breathing techniques of the time were failing. Victims weren't getting enough oxygen, and nobody seemed to have the data to challenge it, until he did. He used science, not tradition. He conducted clinical experiments and lab studies that proved positive pressure ventilation mouth to mouth was not only effective, it was superior. So by 1954, his published research was clear. If someone couldn't breathe, you could breathe for them. So again, what you don't measure can't be improved. Dr. Elam was the first to scientifically prove that positive pressure ventilation, aka mouth to mouth, could save lives. In the early 1950s, he demonstrated that mouth-to-mouth breathing could effectively ventilate a person. And in 1954, he published findings confirming its superiority over outdated manual techniques. Why did he do this? Because the outdated rescue techniques were failing. I told you guys about some of the things we did, trotting with the horses, etc., etc. He prioritized science and evidence-based results, and his goal was to improve survival using real oxygenation strategies. So his role in CPR allowed him to partner with Peter Safar to promote rescue breathing, which laid the scientific foundation for modern CPR. However, he's often overlooked because he was less public-facing than Safar. He focused on clinical proof, not public campaigns. And, history seems to kind of over isolated discoveries, But technically, he's the father of modern rescue breathing, and his work underpins all CPR instruction today. So although the world was skeptical, Elam pushed forward. He partnered with someone, Dr. Peter Safar, who helped take Elam's clinical proof, to the public. And together they made rescue breathing something anyone could learn and use. But why don't most people know his name? Because Safar went on to become the face of CPR, the face of CPR. But Elam laid the scientific foundation. He wasn't focused on the spotlight. He was focused on getting it right. So summing it up, first to prove mouth-to-mouth ventilation was scientifically sound, published breakthrough risk. He published breakthrough research in 1954, co-founded the basis for rescue breathing and CPR, and a quiet pioneer whose fingerprints are on every CPR class today. Dr. James Elam may not be the name most people remember, but every breath we give in CPR is in thanks to him. No. Dr. Elam may not be the name most people remember, but every breath we give in CPR is thanks to him. So continuing in that lane, Peter Safar is a dynamic Australian-born physician, and he took Elam's work and turned it into practice. He advocated for combining ventilation with external compressions, creating the backbone of modern CPR. Also, I guess, unfortunately lost his daughter, even though he was a physician. His 11-year-old daughter, Elizabeth, died due to asthma attack. So his mission became personal. He poured his hand into building better emergency response systems and making sure no other parent would have to suffer in silence without the tools to help. So he didn't just stop there. He made sure to teach CPR to firefighters. He helped create the first emergency medicine systems, and he believed that life-saving skills belong to the public, not just doctors. So because of him, the public really became aware of CPR. But before we jump too far ahead of that, we kind of want to go back to also happening in 1956 was Dr. Paul Zoll. So he performed the first closed chest external defibrillation. So his work built on Beck's earlier internal defibrillation and helped move defibrillation toward public accessibility. So this allows us to kind of write our timeline, because although I previously spoke about Johns Hopkins University, they, I guess, either somewhere in the 50s, the research is a little bit conflicting, but maybe in the 58, somewhere between, well, we'll just say the 50s that way, Dr. Williams Cowenhoven, James Jude, and Guy Knickerbocker demonstrated that rhythmic external chest compressions could maintain blood flow during cardiac arrest. Their findings, published in 1960, confirmed CPR as a viable structured emergency technique. So with that being said, then, if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Safar realized that we had to get the CPR out of the hands of the healthcare professionals and into the streets. And he was motivated then to do the Medic 2 program, which I think taught at least 100,000 people CPR, just in that year, maybe even a shorter time frame. I believe the Medic 1 was maybe a program that was more for the firefighters or healthcare professionals, but he was very big on making sure that people could get the CPR to the people in need and not have to wait on the professionals, because that was slowing down the rates of survival. Okay, so just to clear it up, Ohio's hidden legacy in CPR and AED development. You had Dr. Claude Beck. He was with Case Western Reserve. He was a cardiac surgeon. And so his contribution was the first successful human defibrillation during open heart surgery in 1947 on a 14-year-old boy. That proved that it was possible to shock the humans back to life. So now in the Cleveland hospitals in the 1940s and 50s, they were kind of, I guess, reinventing their cardiac rescue protocols. And later they created the foundation for external defibrillation and CPR techniques, so they were kind of like the forerunners in some of that research. So Dr. Beck's success inspired further research at institutions like Johns Hopkins University, and Dr. Guy Knickerbocker and Dr. William Cowenhoven, who was at they were at Johns Hopkins, built on Beck's findings. So they discovered that chest compressions could circulate blood without surgery. So they became known as the trio. The pulse behind the push, which I guess maybe was published. No. Johns Hopkins trio. The pulse behind the push. Dr. William Cowenhoven, Guy Knickerbocker, and James Jude. They were a groundbreaking team at at Johns Hopkins University. Cowenhoven was an electrical engineer. Knickerbocker was a doctoral student and an electrical researcher, and Jude was a cardiac surgeon. So the three of them developed the concept of external chest compressions in the late 1950s and early 1960s. So initially they were researching defibrillation. They discovered that rhythmic forcible chest compressions could circulate blood effectively without opening the chest. So this became the C in the CPR. This method became the C in the CPR ABC formula. So then in 1960, their groundbreaking research was published showing that external chest compressions could revive cardiac arrest victims without surgery. So this was the first time a non-invasive method was shown to restore circulation and prevent brain death. This mattered because before, chest compressions were not recognized as a life-saving measure. So their work turned the idea of emergency response into a physical action that anyone could do, which led to the modern integration of compressions into CPR protocols. The legacy is the trio's discovery made CPR complete. Chest compressions plus Safar and Elam's rescue breathing equaled true cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Their work has saved millions of lives since 1960. Without them, CPR would have remained incomplete. But because of them, we got the power to keep the heart pumping until help arrives.